He stood beneath the hot studio lights wearing buckskin and beads, a feather tied in his hair. The cameras rolled, the director yelled, "Action!" and the world met Tonto, the loyal companion, the silent shadow of the Lone Ranger. But when someone once asked Jay Silverheels about that famous role, he answered with just 3 words. Tonto is stupid. Those words weren't bitterness, they were truth. Because behind that calm smile was a man who had fought his entire life to be seen as human in a world that preferred him as a symbol. He was the first Native American to ever play a Native character on television, a trailblazer, a hero to millions. And yet Hollywood treated him like a footnote to his own story. This is the untold truth of Jay Silverheels, the athlete who ran faster than hunger, the actor who refused silence, and the man who turned humiliation into history. Jay Silverheels was born Harold J. Smith in 1912 on the Six Nations of the Grand River Reserve in Ontario, Canada. He came from a proud Mohawk lineage, a family that had survived centuries of displacement and broken promises. His father, Alexander George Edwin Smith, had been a decorated World War I hero, a man who'd earned the Military Cross for bravery. But heroism didn't pay the bills. When he came home, deaf from artillery and crippled by pain, all the medals in the world couldn't feed 10 hungry children. The Canadian government sent him $49 a month. That was it. Jay's mother, Mabel, part Mohawk and part Seneca, carried the household on her shoulders. She gathered herbs, mixed medicines, bartered for flour, and prayed the roof wouldn't collapse before winter. Poverty wasn't just around them, it was inside them. But so was pride. Jay grew up. Those stories became his armor. Before Hollywood ever knew his name, Harold was a blur of motion on dusty fields. By the time he was 5, he could outrun boys twice his age. By 19, he was a professional lacrosse player for the Toronto Tecumsehs. Crowds began to murmur about the kid whose shoes flashed like silver. One sports writer wrote, "He moves so fast it looks like lightning under his feet." And just like that, Silverheels was born. He played alongside his cousins, Porky, Beef, and Chubby, names as tough as the times. They crisscrossed the continent, Buffalo, Rochester, Atlantic City. They weren't chasing glory, they were chasing survival. But athletic fame didn't mean freedom. While they scored goals and thrilled crowds, Canada's residential schools were crushing Native identity. Children were beaten for speaking their language. Ceremonies were banned, families torn apart. Even Jay's own sister returned home from one of those schools unable to speak her mother tongue. When the Great Depression hit, the Smith family sank deeper. They moved to Buffalo. His father's injuries worsened. His mother pawned heirlooms to buy food. Government rations were spoiled. Neighbors starved quietly. Yet Harold ran faster. In 1932, he turned pro, earning $75 a game, a fortune back then. Crowds came just to watch him sprint. Coaches started assigning 2 defenders to guard him. Still, he broke through again and again until his name glimmered like steel under floodlights. Then, one wrong punch changed everything. Harold entered the Golden Gloves tournament at Madison Square Garden. He fought hard, but one blow shattered his jaw in 2 places. Weeks on a liquid diet, dreams crushed, but something else was born. Discipline, endurance, defiance. In 1937, fate intervened. During a lacrosse exhibition in Los Angeles, a comedian named Joey Brown noticed him sprint across the field and said, "Kid, you should be in pictures." Days later, Harold was doing stunt work for films, dives, falls, fights for $150, twice what lacrosse paid. He joined the Screen Actors Guild, took the name Jay Silverheels, and stepped into a world that admired his body but ignored his soul. Hollywood had its own rules for Native actors. They were background noise, decoration, exotic silhouettes painted with red clay. Casting directors would make him strip to the waist to see the look. Some laughed, others stared like he was a specimen. He kept his head high. In 1939, he earned $350 a week for drums along the Mohawk, his first real acting job. But even then, he was uncredited. He was the nameless scout, the faceless warrior, the disposable extra in someone else's adventure. By 1941, he'd appeared in over 15 films, still without a name on the poster. But Jay was learning. He studied Shakespeare at night, believing that if he could speak those lines, he could speak anything. He enlisted during World War II, served his country again, and returned to Hollywood with discipline sharpened by service. But the system hadn't changed. White actors in brown makeup still played chiefs. Native voices were still silent. And Jay Silverheels was still waiting for his turn. The turn came in 1948 when John Huston cast him in Key Largo alongside Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. Jay finally appeared on screen with dignity. He wasn't background. He was Tom Osceola, a Seminole fugitive, a man with a name, a motive, a heartbeat. For the first time, critics noticed him. He wasn't just the silent Indian anymore. He was an actor. Then came Broken Arrow, 1950, a film that promised progress but couldn't quite deliver. Jay played Geronimo, while the Apache leader Cochise was played by a white actor in dark makeup. Even in a story about peace, Hollywood couldn't imagine native heroes without disguise. Still, Jay's Geronimo had gravity, eyes filled with sadness and strength. People remembered him. And that memory led directly to the role that would define and curse his career. In 1949, ABC launched The Lone Ranger. Out of 35 hopefuls, Jay Silverheels got the part of Tonto, the first native actor to play a native character on national TV. History had been made. Children across America fell in love with the masked cowboy and his silent partner. But Jay knew something the audience didn't. In Spanish, Tonto means fool. He smiled through it anyway. He said his lines, he rode his horse, he waved at fans. But inside, each script cut deeper. The writers filled Tonto's dialogue with broken English. Me wait here, you go to town. Jay hated it. It sounded wrong, insulting. So he began to ad-lib, changing words, softening the tone. When one director screamed at him for improvising, another, Clayton Moore, the Lone Ranger himself, stood up for him. Let it play. It sounds more real. That simple act of rebellion nearly cost Jay his job. Another director even tried to attack him on set, restrained by crew members before fists flew. Behind the camera, things weren't better. The show's budget was tiny. Jay and Clayton didn't have dressing rooms. They changed clothes in a gas station restroom. The heat in Chatsworth was unbearable, their costumes made of wool and suede. One day, Jay refused to dress at all. He stood under the sun and said, "Not today." The next morning, private dressing rooms appeared. A small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Fame can be a heavy mask. By 1955, The Lone Ranger was one of the top 10 shows in America. Jay was earning about $100,000 per season, a fortune, but still half of what Clayton Moore made. He played the loyal friend, the quiet shadow, the symbol of obedience. But Jay Silverheels was none of those things. He was fluent, articulate, witty, and proud. The scripts gave him broken sentences. Life gave him broken respect. During one fight scene rehearsal, a stuntman fell on him. Jay staggered, clutching his chest. Heart attack. He was only 43. For 8 weeks, he lay in a hospital bed while writers explained his absence by saying Tonto is in Washington, meeting the Great White Father. Even his heart attack was turned into a stereotype. At home, he was simply Harold. He'd married Mary DeRoma in 1945, an Italian-American woman who gave him 4 children, Jay Jr., Marilyn, Pamela, and Karen. He joked that he married an Italian to get back at Christopher Columbus. Humor was his armor, too. When the series ended in 1957, he reprised Tonto twice in films, The Lone Ranger, 1956, and The Lost City of Gold, 1958. Neither flopped, neither soared. But the shadow of Tonto followed him everywhere. He could never escape it. The 1960s arrived with new winds, civil rights, protest, awakening. native voices began to rise. And some of those voices turned their anger on Tonto. Activists called him a stooge, a yes man, an Indian step-and-fetch-it. For Jay, it was heartbreak. The very role that had broken barriers was now seen as betrayal. But instead of retreating, he built something new. In Los Angeles, he co-founded the Indian Actors Workshop, alongside Buffy Sainte-Marie, Iron Eyes Cody, and Noble Kid Chisel. It started small in community centers and church basements, but it became a beacon. Every week, Native performers gathered to train in acting, speech, stunt work, and confidence. They learned to face a camera, not as caricatures, but as creators. Jay wrote letters to presidents and studio heads demanding better representation. He argued that boycotts wouldn't work for Native Americans. The industry didn't fear their money because it had never paid them fairly. Change, he said, would come from within. He kept teaching, encouraging, shaping. One of his students, Michael Horse, would later play Tonto in 1981's The Legend of the Lone Ranger and star in Twin Peaks. Jay's seeds were already growing. He also found peace in a second love, harness racing. He trained horses at Hollywood Park, earning his driver's license and touring racetracks across America. The crowds cheered again, just like they had for the lacrosse star of long ago. He was running once more, this time not from hunger but toward meaning. By the mid-1970s, Jay's body began to fail him. Strokes struck without warning, stealing his voice, his strength, but not his spirit. In 1979, the industry finally gave him a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He arrived in a wheelchair, surrounded by Native dancers, barely able to speak. The crowd stood in silence as he whispered his thanks. 9 months later, on March 5, 1980, Jay Silverheels died at 67 from complications of another stroke and pneumonia. His ashes were carried home to the Six Nations Reserve, the same soil where he had once chased a ball barefoot, a boy dreaming of freedom. His son, Jay Silverheels Jr., continued acting, appearing in The Legend of the Lone Ranger, a film that failed but carried his father's torch. Decades later, Native films like Smoke Signals and Dances with Wolves would finally offer the authenticity Jay had fought for. He was posthumously inducted into the Western Performers Hall of Fame in 1993 and the Canadian Lacrosse Hall of Fame in 1997 under the name Harry Tonto Smith. His portrait still hangs in Buffalo's Shays Performing Arts Center. Jay Silverheels once said he cringed every time he delivered Tonto's broken English lines. Yet, when invited on The Tonight Show in 1969, he walked on stage wearing that same costume and faced the laughter head-on. "My name is Tonto," he said, smiling. "I hail from Toronto, and I speak Esperanto." The audience roared. That moment wasn't comedy, it was reclamation. He turned pain into power, mockery into meaning. He was the man who ran faster than the wind, who fought stereotypes with dignity, and who built a path for others to walk free. He showed the world that a warrior doesn't always carry a weapon. Sometimes he carries a script, a cause, and a will that refuses to die. Jay Silverheels, the man they called Tonto, proved that even when history names you a fool, you can answer back with greatness.